Jacqueline, welcome to Security Halt podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Let's kick it off. You're somebody that has been there for our soft professionals, for our service members. We missed each other while I was a patient at the Intrepid Spirit Center. And one of the beautiful things about that center is it's oftentimes the first time we as patients are giving tools such as yoga and art therapy, these modalities that to us seem very foreign. And at first, we can be very turned off by it. But like I learned in my journey, these things are so powerful, and they are often the first resource that can get us to kind of like chill out and take off the armor and then really allow some healing to take place. So today, I not only want to dive into your journey, but I want you to be able to speak on everything that you do, because right now, integrative health isn't talked about enough. And like in my humbling experience, I know I was so against it until I had my moment of like, wow, like
hmm
this actually has a lot of power in it.
I'd love to talk all about it.
Let's do it. Let's dive in. So how'd you get involved in this world?
All right. Well, I think art was my main entryway. So when I was little, I always gravitated toward art. So even as early as I can remember, I was asking for like art related gifts. I'd fall asleep and have art supplies in my bed with me. Like I would draw before I fell asleep every night. In kindergarten, when they said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I already said art teacher, even back then. So it was very clear to me from the very beginning that I had a pull toward art. And then as life got difficult, even as a kid, even as a child, or then in middle school, I knew that if I didn't feel good about something, if I turned to making art about it, I knew that I would feel better. So whether it was just sitting down to draw like a fruit or anything, or if it was, then I started to learn, even if someone I felt was like wronging me, if I sat down and I did a portrait of them, my feelings about them would totally shift. Like it didn't really excuse whatever I was upset about, but it helped me kind of like spend, I would say, like meditative time with them. They're not even there. It's just me and a drawing, but I could just tell that it would resolve the negative feelings and allow me to keep going. So fast forward a little bit later, I was in a used bookstore and followed the art section and the psychology section. I was already interested in these things, and they met at one book. That was the art therapy section. It was tiny. It was literally one book. So I got it. I read it. I learned that it was a thing that, no one in my life had heard about. I would talk to people and they'd be like, "Oh, I think I have a second aunt who does that in Israel," or like something far away. Like it was like not something that people really knew much about. And I'll keep going on the art thread, and then I'll introduce the health thread. So I also had a few different health things going on, some that started when I was really little, some that started in high school, and um, we'll say migraines. We'll start with migraines, for instance. So in 10th grade, was diagnosed with chronic migraines. I would have like 3 or 4 a week, and the treatment that I was getting for them was all, medications that I was getting all the side effects for. And like one medication would be recommended and that would give me side effects. And then when a doctor started to prescribe me with like a second medication to fix the side effects caused by the first, I already was like, wait, are you giving me this to solve the thing that the last one started? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, no, I don't want to be on anything. And um, even when I was young, was pretty good at advocating for myself toward doctors. And so by the time I was after college, probably a year outside of college, I was seeing a doctor and I said, I don't want any more prescriptions for my migraines. I don't want to try anymore. I get all the side effects. And she walked back in and she had a notepad, and on the notepad were the name of 2 books. And she said, don't tell anyone that I'm giving this to you. It was like a prescription note. She was like, don't tell anyone that there's not prescriptions on this. Go home, read these books, see if they help. Basically, she was
Wow.
like, I'm supposed to be prescribing you with things, but I understand you're frustrated. Go home, read these books, see if they help. And I read those books and I started making holistic changes
What books were
immediately.
they?
Well, one was, I'm pretty sure it was called Heal Your Headache. The other one's escaping me right now, but I'm pretty sure Heal Your Headache is the one that I'm thinking of. What it helped me understand was that, we get migraines from inflammation,
Mhm.
like, and there's all these different things, internal and external, that cause inflammation. And we all have a baseline, or we have a threshold.
Yeah.
So let's say you have 5 different things stacked up before your inflammation is so great. Then you introduce the 6th thing and then you have a migraine. But if you can understand what all of your like contributing factor building blocks are that make you reach your threshold and then take those out of your life, if you encounter one, you're not going to be anywhere near the threshold that makes you have a migraine. So it helped me really understand that. And so there was kind of the art helping people thread, my own personal holistic health thread. And then when I was working for the military, they kind of finally collided. And I was like, okay, these need to come together.
Yeah.
But so I guess we'll start there and then we can kind of dig in where you want to. And I can go through my career history when you want to.
Absolutely. Dig in. However you want to cut this pie up and slice this, do it up.
All right. So let's see. So I was going to college torn if I was going to study art education, art therapy, or graphic design. I started at an art school for graphic design, but it was too computer based. And I knew right away, no, I want to be more with people.
Yeah.
So I switched to art education. Art therapy was always my end goal, but there were no jobs in it. Like there were, but if you looked, it didn't seem like there were any. And I always knew that teaching would be an amazing stepping stone. So I started off, I got a master's in art education. I graduated the undergrad part early and I volunteered working with homeless kids and moms in Brazil before the master's portion started. When I was there, that was really powerful. And we did make a difference, but I remember when I left really feeling like I wish I had the education of an art therapist here.
Yeah.
I was able to make a certain amount of impact with an art education lens, but I really wish I had the knowledge of an art therapist.
What part of Brazil were you in?
I was in Salvador. Yeah, I was up in Salvador. And there was actually a lot of things happened there from my own experiences with trauma and moral injury and things that also became a thread for me to be able to understand certain things.
Like a happy-go-lucky place.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. Yeah, not where we were. So anyway, like that, there are a lot of things that I pursued that helped me understand the essence of what people were then, fast forward bringing to the table years later in the military settings. But so I came home, got my master's in art education. I taught in Fairfax County Public Schools for a few years. And then, but from the beginning of that, was already getting my prerequisites, my night school credits to go back for art therapy. There were certain things that would come up in the art from kids that were red flags, we'll call them. And I didn't personally like that. Like, I created the container where these things were coming up in the artwork, but I wasn't allowed to process them. Like, if something concerning came up, I had to pass the art directly on to a guidance counselor, and then I was left out of the loop. So I didn't like that. I wanted to be more part of the actual processing of what was coming up. And then there were also, certain behavioral things that show up in kids you can address through the kid, but there's also a lot that comes up that, like it's not going to get resolved in the kid as long as the parents are still, demonstrating those things. So it became very clear that, if you really want to help kids, a big way to do that is to actually, do therapy with the adults. And then there are other threads as well. So I wound up going to George Washington University for art therapy, which was an incredible program. I chose that program because it was like ahead of its time. We had a whole trauma track that was ahead of its time. We had a trauma clinic that we would run for the community. So we got a lot of experience doing that. And we also had this whole research arm. So I did like PhD level research while getting my master's in art therapy. And so I knew that when I went into art therapy, I wanted to be definitely treating trauma. I knew that I definitely wanted to be involved in research because
What time period was this?
This was 2011 to 2013. So as a teacher,
trauma informed like research and care, like it's already there. It was coming around.
It was coming around. Body Keeps the Score came out right after that. So like it was coming around. Like the woman at our clinic who directed the trauma program, she was, I would say, more of a pioneer, bringing in the trauma informed, bringing in the yoga and meditation, these more somatic practices in with the therapy. And she, like, we read some of the chapters from Body Keeps the Score when I was a student, and then looking back, I'm like, oh, it wasn't even published yet. She must have had an in, because she would give us.
So powerful.
Yeah.
That's like the first book I recommend the guys. Like, and it's now like I remember when I started my education, like there's like 5 core books that I already gone through front to back, and it's like you go to these classes and they start teaching from it. And I'm like, all right, sweet, like I already know this stuff. Like, guys, if you're listening, you haven't read The Body Keeps the Score, like you got to dive into this. Like, I didn't understand trauma from the point of like everybody thinks that their life is just normal, go through it. It's God, whatever. I went through some bad stuff, but when you really dig into that book and you realize, and it starts to really help you process and understand the like the health issues that you suffered through as a kid and maybe your early adulthood, or maybe responses are still linked to the things you went through as a child. Like that blew my mind, because you're just like, whatever. You get canker sores, so no big deal. It's like I'm always in fight or flight. Well, if that's you, like there's a reason for that. It started somewhere. Like, dude, be willing to read the books and do the homework. Like now it's easier to talk about, but like you're saying, like back then, like it was just starting to creep in. Like that's a good program.
Yeah, it was an amazing program. I even had some friends afterwards never get into art therapy because they wound up becoming stay-at-home moms or something right away, something like that. And they're all like, you know what? I don't regret it. Like, the amount of money it cost was totally worth it for the amount of personal development that I did. Like, it was a very intense, very good program. And so my first year-long internship in that program, I was at Georgetown Hospital working with pediatric oncology patients. And so a lot came out of that experience. And then my second year-long internship was at the NICO, at the Intrepid Center of Excellence at Walter Reed. And there were a lot of reasons that I was pulled to that site. And then there were a lot of things that I learned in my own analyzing myself and my family and whatnot, that it made me feel very passionately about, okay, this is the course that I want to be on for a while. While I was at the NICO, that is the year that the Intrepid Fallen Heroes Fund was able to start breaking ground on some of the satellite centers. And so that year they broke ground on Fort Belvoir. And the team of doctors from Fort Belvoir that came through to tour the NICO and see kind of which pieces they wanted to implement, which pieces they didn't. They went back and I got word that they weren't planning on having an art therapist, even though when you go to the NICO, you see just how big of an impact that program has there. And so while I was a student, I wound up going to Fort Belvoir, doing presentations there on why the art therapy was such a crucial piece of the program. And then I also wrote a grant proposal for the National Endowment for the Arts that I wound up getting as soon as I graduated. It matched up perfectly with the ribbon cutting for Fort Belvoir. And so I basically convinced Fort Belvoir to give me a chance and give me a room. They gave me a small room. And then I had convinced the National Endowment for the Arts to give me 3 months worth of funding to pilot inserting art therapy there. And so they both agreed and it went really well. And so in just the first 3 months, I was able to prove the worth of having art therapy there. And then it immediately turned into a contractor position through the NEA. And then Belvoir saw the value of it so much, though, that within a year, I was already a GS position. So from there, I was able to get a GS, a permanent position, and the program grew. And then we pulled on a music therapist, another art therapist, and then fast forward to 2018, and I wound up leaving there to go to Eglin Air Force Base to help the Air Force start their first NICO satellite. And when I went there, they let me be the art therapist, but also the yoga and meditation teacher. That was incredible. And that's when Sounds Like I Dismissed You. But got to work with a lot of your peers. In 2020, like the same week that all the shutdowns started happening for the pandemic, my mom was diagnosed with a stage 4 cancer, out of the blue. And because I had that experience working in the oncology part of the hospital at Georgetown for a year, I knew the words that she was saying before she did. I mean, she obviously was saying the words that the doctors were saying, but she didn't really understand what they meant yet. And I knew that what she was about to embark on was going to require a lot of caregiving. And so I wound up, it was kind of like Jumanji. I had to move it, there was, everything shut down. We were working from home. I was living in Shalimar, and then things opened up for a little, and I packed everything up, moved my stuff to New Jersey, and then things shut back down again. But yeah, I lived with her for a year, taking care of her during her intensive cancer treatment. And then after that, I used that whole, I saw the bright side of leaving these jobs that I had created. And I mean, I had a series of dream jobs. I absolutely loved working for the Invisible Wound Centers for the military, but I knew I needed to go take care of my mom for a bit. And at the end of that, she felt really guilty having me leave these jobs. She knows how much work I put into creating them and how much I love them. And I was like, I've always wanted to have my own practice. It's okay. I'm just going to use this as my stepping stone to push me into the next thing that I meant to do. Already client, especially when I started doing the yoga, clients were asking me more questions about health and physical health, but it wasn't my role to answer those questions. I kind of direct them to the people who is more appropriate. But during the pandemic, when I was taking care of my mom, I got certified in integrative nutrition health coaching, so I could bring that more in my wheelhouse. And then the things that helped me a lot during the things that come up from treating trauma 24/7, and then becoming a caregiver in a really intensive situation, were some more of these energy healing practices that I really got into. And so I got certified in Reiki and Theta healing and Feng Shui. And now that I work for myself and I can, co-treat with myself and decide what someone needs most in any given session, I can bring it all to the table. So now we do art therapy in a session if that's what's most appropriate. We do yoga and meditation or Ayurveda if that's most appropriate. We do energy healing. We can do Feng Shui. So I can really address mind, body, soul, space when I work with people now.
That's beautiful. It's really important to know that anytime you're having to take a pause, that you can focus on family that's going through something that takes so much more out of you. Our providers, a lot of people, I know I certainly did, we take you guys for granted. We take everything that you do for us, and we don't pause and reflect that you guys have emergencies too. You guys have lives and people that depend on you. You guys do so much for us. And that's the thing that's really important. When we look at I like to say the chain of custody, when a guy gets hurt, it's never just showing up to Intrepid Spirit. Everybody there is constantly trying to connect you to the next higher level of care if you need to. That's one thing I didn't realize till the very end, when I was finally coming back from, not just one treatment center, but another one in a downstep outpatient treatment center, was they always had all my information. And it was always because one awesome member of a team was doing this extra work on their own to connect with another provider to let them know hey, this is the patient you're going to be receiving. And this is not a standard protocol thing or that goes down. This is how much you guys care about taking care of the soft professional, of the individual that walks in those centers. And you take so much on. When you were going through that period in your life, taking care of your mother, taking care of her while she needs you, what were some of the things that you were leaning on? Were you leaning on the things you were learning and trying to get better at just so you could help yourself? Did you lean in your own art therapy? What helped you the most?
Well, I will connect a few of the things you said in answering that. So one of the first things, yes, we do. We care so much. We care so much. And I know personally, one of the biggest criticisms I was ever given by a supervisor was you care too much. But you kind of can't not. I don't want to be someone who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be in a field where if I don't care. But so even just while I was I'll answer your question, but kind of go through the phases because when you're in school to be a therapist and you start out in a half-time internship and you get used to the weight of what it's like to carry other people's weight for half the week, and you do that for a couple of years. Well, the second year you're even more because then we're running our trauma clinic. So what it's like, to carry other people's weight for 60% of the week. And then you go full time and you're stepping into 5 days a week, being in other people's heads and spaces with them and carrying that amount of weight. And then, one thing that was funny at Belvoir, all of us providers were given the opportunity to do, the alternate work schedule where you work 9-hour days, get every other Monday or Friday off. None of the rehab providers took that. Every single mental health provider took that. We all needed that one day to recoup so well. And so that's already something, right? And then there's a certain amount of weight you get used to carrying. So initially, yes, art therapy was my main tool. I would do art therapy all the time, especially at the beginning when people were telling me the first kinds of stories each time. Yeah. All of those stories would wind up playing on the forefront of my mind. And so it was really important for me to personally do my own personal by myself art therapist. I wasn't sharing it with another art therapist. It was just me in my own journal, externalizing those images that just would kind of become the glasses I was wearing. You know what I mean? And as soon as I would do that, they would leave me. So it was a really important part of my own process. And then going through my own personal life things, going through a divorce, during that time, I would use art therapy in other ways, but to make sure that like my own emotions weren't getting in the way of me being able to be present. And then I was the victim of a couple accidents when I was there too. And so had my own TBI and PTSD and things from that. And then like could also understand what, so my clients were the first ones to notice I had a TBI. I had got, someone had,
they diagnosed you.
one of my, in 2017, I was stopped at a light in Arlington where I lived, and the person behind me just wasn't paying attention. She didn't see the light was red, and she just hit me. She just wasn't paying attention. So I had a whiplash concussion from that, and that was bad. It took me like 3 months to get back on a bike. The next morning, I knew that like, I work in a TBI center. I knew like, okay, I think I blacked out for a second, but I still was the one in the accident, like communicating with the cops, like the other people, and the person who hit me didn't have insurance, and the person that she caused me to hit didn't have insurance. And so like everyone kind of fled. And it was like, so I was there to kind of take care of everything, even though I had just I blacked out when I hit my face on the wheel and stuff. But anyway, so I knew enough to say, like, I probably shouldn't wake up at 5 tomorrow morning. And I canceled my first few appointments for the day. But I thought that I'd be fine to get to work and like run my group at 10 a.m. And so I was running my 10 a.m. like level 3 open studio art therapy group at Belvoir. And the open studio group was hilarious. It was always like 7 people, big characters, like dark humor soaring, like everyone like working on their own really intensive projects, but also, Jackie, can you help me with this? Jackie, can you help me with this? So you're kind of like in that setting. I was always, one person might be pour painting, another person is sculpting, another person is like wood burning. You're like managing a whole bunch of things, like never missing a beat. And that day, they were interacting with me like normal. I was like, hold on. Like I could only handle like one thing at a time. I was like, one at a time. Just so slow.
Yeah.
And I remembered like these huge guys, I was used to working with, but they just kind of like surrounded me at my desk, and they were staring down at me, and they started like doing all the tests on me. And they were like, Jackie, do you have a TBI? What happened? I started to explain, and they were like, and then they just started chanting, one of us. Anyway.
You made it. You made it.
Yeah. So then from there, had a lot of experience doing certain holistic things to recover from that. I had like as a therapist, it was really scary because one of the things that you build up is the ability to empathize with what someone is saying without absorbing it. And the scariest thing that happened when I had my TBI while being a trauma therapist was, my boss was like, don't do your deep trauma work right away. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? That's what I do. Like, there's plenty of guys. I'm like in the middle of processing a traumatic event. I can't just tell them to wait 3 months on it. And so the first afternoon that I was like back in the middle of one of my like deeper trauma processing things I was doing with someone, and you can feel yourself like, when you have a TBI, you can feel yourself like, I know I'm at 10% of myself, or like, I know I'm operating at 20% of myself, right? And so I was feeling that, and I was like, is this ethical? Is this okay? Like, I know I feel like I'm at 30% of myself, but I also don't want to tell him to like just wait a while. We're in the middle of something. So I tried. I like did my job, and then I did the session fine. But after that session, I cried 6 hours incessantly that day. That is not something that I ever do. So I had lost like that. I don't know how to describe it, but it was like an internal mesh that would allow me to empathize without absorbing. And so one of the scariest things I had to rebuild up in my TBI healing was like regrowing that mesh, which is fine. It's fine. Don't worry about me. No one should worry about me. But that was like, as a trauma therapist going through a TBI, that is something that I experienced. And so anyway, yoga and meditation became a really important part of my healing. And like, I had also been an endurance athlete, so I had to figure out these ways to, while building myself up instead of tearing myself down. And then the more and more you're going through your own stuff, plus treating trauma, there would just be certain energies, like certain grief. And at a certain point, you lose the sense of like, is this mine or is this someone else's? And so from there, I got into receiving Reiki, which was extremely helpful for me in releasing some of that energetic stuff that you hold on to, even if you've processed it out psychologically, even if you've moved it out through yoga. And then anyway, when I was taking care of my mom, every single day, I'd wake up 2 hours before anyone else in the house. And the first hour was me doing my own transcendental meditation and my own Reiki and my own theta healing on myself. The whole second hour was my own personal yoga practice. And then I would emerge from my room and be able to take care of everyone else for the rest of the day. And like, if I ever didn't do that, I just wasn't my best self. So I was like, for me personally, I have to take care of myself first thing in the day before I'm like alive to anyone else.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Like, I cannot stress enough the importance of having your own morning routine. Like, for me, mindfulness and working out, that is still like my go-to. And if anything happens, and I've proven to myself enough times now, if your schedule gets hectic and you got to front load some things, it never works to put it on the back burner and do it later on in the day. And you never get the same energy, the same alert and wakefulness. Never sacrifice that. Like, even if you have to say no to things, it's okay to say no to things. Do the things that pour into you first. Even if you have to wake up at 4:30, do it. It's worth it. Go to bed early. Let me tell you, I can go to bed at 8 p.m. these days, and I don't care. It is one of the greatest things. I'm 40 years old, going to bed 8. Some days, let me tell you, 7:30. Oh, chef's kiss. I mean, here pretty soon, that's going to be wishful thinking. I will lose that for a while as we bring our first little one into this world. But I'm going to enjoy being able to go to bed. Dude, I've gone to bed at 6 p.m. some days. It's amazing. It's just
congratulations.
Just being able to wake up and then like you wake up super early at like 3 a.m. Like, this is fucking awesome.
Yeah.
It's like you can't get that back. Being able to do that early morning meditation, that mindfulness, and get that workout in, that's the key thing. We never prioritized mind, body, and spirit. We always prioritize just the body. And then you get out, and then maybe you don't work out as much. Maybe you stop doing all that great lifting. And then no wonder everything falls apart, because you didn't have the spirit or the mind developed. You didn't have all these pillars to fall back on. Like, get back in there. Discomfort's great for the body. I'm so glad that, are you still doing endurance or like doing any like heavy workouts? Like, is that part of your journey, or have you put that on the back burner?
Well, that's a good question. Before I forget, I just wanted to give a shout out to the clients that I had at Eglin when I had to leave to take care of my mom, because like, when you're a provider and you do care so much about the people you're taking care of, it does, it's hard. It's hard to leave. It's hard to take care of your own stuff. And I had learned that, the importance of that early on, working with kids with cancer. But a lot of my clients were like, you've helped us so much. Like, go give this same thing to your mom. So everyone I worked with, no one gave me crap about it. Everyone was like, you've given us so much. Go. Like, your mom needs you now. So that was, just 1,000,000% appreciated, to not have like guilt that would naturally be there. So.
Yeah. No, you guys do. every single one of you go out of your way to help us out in so many ways. It's insane. It's truly, oftentimes you're in so much pain, you can't realize what's going on. But I know for a fact on the backside, when things de-escalate, when the pain is managed, when you've been able to get tools for whatever you're dealing with, it hits you just how much these people pour into you. They literally, they are there to be flexible with your schedule. I remember I was so hesitant to get help, and I was looking for any sort of excuse not to come in there. I'm like, well, I got to do this thing at like 7:30 in the morning. And shout out to Stephanie. Stephanie would be like, okay, I'll be here at 7. I'll get them, or let's do 6:30. I'll be here early enough. And I'm like, fuck, she's got a family. She's got a husband. Like, they're willing to do, I mean, every single thing they could, and then refer you to the next doctor. And then before you even get there, the doctor and the nurse, they already know you, because like, oh yeah, no, they called. We know who you are. We know what you need to get. Like, they will do everything. You guys are so unique in how passionate you are. And I think it's definitely because the Intrepid Spirit is not like any other clinic in the world. It's very specific to who you're treating. And the individuals really don't see you just as a number. They see you as a human being that just needs help to get back to being like functioning adult. So like, things are going to be changed, but we're going to give you tools to get you back to like, you can continue doing your job. And that is so powerful. Like, I think you guys deserve a lot more credit and a hell of a lot more money.
Well, thank you. Yeah, with the endurance question, that, I mean, in dealing with a lot of this stuff, that was really helpful. So for a long time, just after work, running for a long time or biking for a long time. I did a marathon when I was a teacher, but I, at the time, was really good at, mind over body. And I, would wear the watches, and I would be like, just stick to this certain pace. And I, gave myself a femur stress fracture. And then I was like, I can't even put my jeans on, but I'm still going to run my race. And I then had to learn, like, well, that sucked, because now I'm in physical therapy for like almost a year. And like, so I,
we rub off on you guys.
Actually,
give you bad habits.
That was me. I started at Belvoir with my femur stress fracture. So I think that's like, I kind of mirrored, and then I had to learn, then I switched into more biking. And then after my TBI, when I was like, I can't even get on a bike right now. And then so I started doing yoga really hardcore, and I wound up pulling something. And then I was like, no, I can't even do yoga. So I had to really, really pull things back. Like, everything's going to be okay if you walk instead of run. And like, at the time, I didn't believe that. Like, at the time, I did not believe that. And I know it's similar thinking that a lot of you guys go through. But then I did get into yoga in a way. Initially, I got into it just because I heard that it helps you not get overuse injuries from running. So I saw it as purely like a active rest day kind of thing. But then I had enough experiences with cry yoga, where like, it's something that we call it, where like you start actually going to yoga and then you just start crying out of nowhere because like different emotions are getting unlocked, and you're just lying in Shavasana and you're like, I think I'm supposed to get divorced, and like, I can't ignore it, because every time I come to yoga, I'm crying in the back of the room. And it just helps you really confront things that you may not want to. And so then I started going into it more for like that emotional release spiritual practice. I knew there was a lot there. And then just the deeper and deeper I got into it, I could tell that it was actually replenishing me instead of breaking me down. And I could also tell that like, there's not enough hours in the day. Like, if I'm 9 hours treating trauma, and then what? I'm going to go for a 9-hour run to process it all. And then I'm just left with like an exhausted, broken body that can't rebuild itself. So I needed to start finding things where I could totally like clear the energy, process what I needed to, and also bounce back in like really short amounts of time. And so that's what I found in doing more of the mind body connecting arts,
Nice.
I would say. So now I work out. I would say I'm like on any given day could sign up for a sprint triathlon and would be able to do great, but I'm not training for anything super long right now, but I work out every day. It's an important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. As a provider, I think now our culture is changing. We no longer look at integrative practices like Reiki or Feng Shui and see it as this like weird mystical stuff. Like it's more accepted. But how do we explain it to those out there that don't understand or don't have any concept? Like there is efficacy behind this stuff. Like there is science put into this, and it's not witchcraft. Like, how do we begin speaking about it, and how do you bring that out to somebody that's sort of on the fence, wanting to learn more?
Well, that's a really good question. All right. Number one, I started including the feng shui in the work that I do with clients one-on-one as a response to the number one complaint we would get at the Intrepid Spirit Centers. So a lot of times, the most common complaint that we would get is I make all of these gains when I'm at these intensive treatment programs, but then I go home and I feel like I backslide, and it's because my environment didn't change. Like everyone around me stayed the same, my environment didn't change. And so even though feng shui seems like really far out in left field, it is not. Your environment has a huge impact on you. And there's like from simple things that people aren't thinking about, like clutter, even just being surrounded by clutter. Research has shown over and over how much it raises your cortisol. So you're in your home, your place that's supposed to be like your nest of relaxation, but your cortisol is spiking because either you're surrounded by clutter or a lot of the things that we'd wind up working with in art therapy, I was kind of tapping into feng shui before even knowing it, but I would do these projects and I would invite guys to bring in items that they had at home, because you all have a lot of items that you have saved because they're really significant, but they may be hidden or buried away because there's a lot of negative association with them, but they're too important to throw out. And so there were a lot of the art therapy projects that I'd guide people in and then invite them to bring things in from home. They'd wind up going through bins or things that they'd been surrounded by. They were like, I can't believe the energy that I'm just sitting here surrounded by it at any given time. But then the process of actually going through those things with intention and then bringing them in to create a piece of artwork with, where you're literally like transmuting your emotional connection with that piece. And then now you've taken something that you essentially tried to bury, but was still like every time you pass it, it's negatively affecting you because there's negative things associated with it. But now you go through the process of creating something with it. And now it might be that same item might be part of a memorial sculpture or something like that, that now you have proudly on display somewhere. So now you've taken something in your home where you didn't even realize how much it was spiking your cortisol and raising your depression and anxiety, but now you've transmuted it. Literally the same thing might still be in your home, but you associate it with appreciation or gratitude. So there's so many ways that through art therapy, through feng shui, we can actually transmute the energy of these items that have an effect on you. And then I guess another way to answer your question, just with energy in general, I mean, physics shows everything is energy. So I'm energy, you're energy, the cup is energy. I use a lot of singing bowls in my practice. Our chakras all work at their own frequency. All of the organs in our body work at their own frequencies. And so just like people have service dogs who, like if you're getting dysregulated and your anxiety is spiking and you're about to have a panic attack or something, your service dog can sense that.
Yep.
They'll come up next to you. They'll like snuggle on you. Their balanced heart rate can regulate yours. All this energy work is the same. So using different energetic frequencies or sound bowls or tuning forks, all that, you're literally tuning just like you would a guitar. You're tuning the frequencies in your body so that they're vibrating at the frequency that they're supposed to. And yeah, but there's so many different ways we can explain it. Depends on who we're talking to.
Yeah.
During,
It's just go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, like during Yoga Nidra is something that I offer. And I never start off with how deep it is. We always start off with, this typically makes people feel more anchored and grounded and centered. It typically helps people sleep better. One session of Yoga Nidra is as restful as 4 hours of sleep.
Really?
Yeah. And actually it gets you into that stage 4 sleep that people talk about. The delta waves, which are needed, like you need to get to that place for your lymphatic system and your brain to work, for your brain at night when you're sleeping to actually push out the waste so it doesn't turn into plaque that turns into neurodegenerative issues. So you can get that through Yoga Nidra. And then the people I work with, because so many people wear whoops now and stuff like that, we can see as we're practicing how much more stage 4 sleep they're getting at night. But so a lot of people will tune into these like physical body benefits.
Mm-hmm.
But then the deeper they get into it, they start to understand the more energetic benefits of it as well. Like, when I'm really in that transcendent place, I become one with the universe and gain all these new solutions to my problems and feel into bliss. And so meeting people where they're at. But I mean, a lot of people get into it first with the physical and then feel into the more.
It's always the first thing we're trying to figure out. Either find a new way or a cutting edge to get a little bit more performance out of our body. And that's like the big sexy thing. Like, how can I get better? Just a little bit better at this. And it's like that's good enough. That's the gateway. Now come in and realize the true benefits of this. It's like being able to live in the present moment. It's why it's so hard to sell mindfulness to people. It's like, dude, it's not going to give you or shave minutes off your runtime, but it's going to get you to realize what's more important. That's here now in this present moment. No longer focused on your perceived notion of your suffering or how bad you think the world is. It's like, just take a moment to breathe. Take a moment to just be outside. And that's always a hard sell. But like, I think even when I always talk about this, it was the Interpretive Spirit was the first place that offered me mindfulness. And I very loudly told Dr. Piazza, F off. No, in a very disgruntled way. And I needed to figure it out the hard way. And I'm very grateful and very humbled that, eventually I went down my downward spiral. And eventually it was mindfulness that finally gave me some sort of like understanding that I had some control again, that I could take control of this journey, that I could be in charge and I could be better. I just had to be able to eat my words and come back to it really humble.
Yeah. And just, the first person who recommended Reiki to me, I wasn't ready to hear it. It's not, I do all of these things, but I am similar. Like the first time I'd hear about them, I thought yoga was just stretching for years. Like I didn't start to give it a chance until I thought it would just help me not get injured running,
Yeah.
And then you have to actually feel. I just feel like with all of this stuff, people have to feel it. And once you have a moment feeling it, then you're like, oh, well, maybe I should feel that a little bit more. And then maybe I should give it some credit because it works. So it's normal.
So how do you like having your own practice now these days? You're on your own, doing your own thing. I would imagine it's a little liberating. It's a little bit freeing, right?
It's freeing. I can juggle things. I can do more things. So I can like since I'm running my own practice, I had always wanted to do the Everest Base Camp trek. But when you're working for the government, it's hard to get a month off, you know?
Yeah.
So 2 years ago, I went to Nepal and I spent 7 days studying with a Nepalese sound healer. So that's where I learned sound bowl healing. And I came home with my set of Tibetan sound bowls. And then I spent a few weeks doing the Everest Base Camp trek and then exploring a bit afterwards. You know, people are like, must be nice to take a month off. But like, I mean, it's all connected, right? Like the whole time, yes, that's something I've always wanted to do. But at the same time, I came home with a new modality that my clients love and get huge benefit from. And there's different energies all over the world. And sometimes you need to go different places to feel into them. And doing the whole Everest Base Camp trek was a huge, like, meditative spiritual journey the entire time. And I advanced a lot in my yoga trainings. Last year I went to Bali for a month and a half. So I spent a month getting my 300-hour in yoga and Ayurveda. So now I have my 500-hour in yoga teaching, but then could explore for a while and really, you know, immerse myself in the energies of Bali. And that did more for my business than arguably, like, I've had some business coaches and I've gotten a tremendous amount of kind of strategic things from them, but I needed to be in Bali for a month and a half to like really shift some energies within me that have propelled my business forward. So I love the flexibility for sure. And it also allows me to juggle my one-on-one work with people with being able to, I work at different nonprofit, like veteran retreats. So I can go do art therapy here for a while, and I can go work with this group of, you know, caregivers for a long weekend. And it just kind of gives me freedom to do more of, to integrate in a different way.
Yeah. I think it's vital to be able to travel and go out. This idea that you have to stay in the States and you have to constantly be hustling and grinding. No, sometimes the best things you can do is just get out, go explore. Like like, I can't recommend that enough. Like, there's more important things to do than just worry about the 9 to 5 struggle and the work that needs to get done. Go adventure.
Well, and it's empowering, it's therapeutic in its own right. Like I was really shy, had a lot of anxiety growing up. And in my junior year of high school, I was a foreign exchange student in Italy. And
oh, no way.
Yeah. And that whole experience, like when you're 16, going somewhere you don't know anyone, living with a family of people who don't speak your language, like you have to learn the language. Everything is on you, right? Yeah. So you either crumble and go home early, or it builds your confidence. And so I do have certain clients who I suggest go travel for a bit. It's incredibly therapeutic. It's incredibly rebuilding. And, you know, like traveling as a civilian who just wants to explore is a way different experience than when you're doing things in the military. And it's like some of the, like, I married, I'm in my second marriage now, but now I'm married to someone who's a retired recon Marine, and like I wanted to go scuba diving. He was like, I hate scuba diving now. And I was like, let's go. And so then we, like, you know, go on like a nice scuba diving adventure and see sharks and pretty fish and stuff. He's like, oh, scuba diving's fun again. It's like, yeah, like you don't have to let the military
ruin everything.
Everything.
Yeah. That's one of the biggest things I tell people. Like, if camping was ruined by the government, go out there and find your love of it once more. Like, be willing to explore things that the government soured for you. Travel, go do things. Be willing to do what you want to do, and don't let a past experience deter you from it, which is often really difficult because there's so much, especially in the soft community, like you get to do so many things, and I always talk about this. Like, you need to experience awe. You need to re-experience awe here in the United States or abroad somewhere, not in Iraq or Afghanistan. The reason why, it's because you have this idea that the greatest things you did were in a far off place on a ridge line somewhere. And it was beautiful. There's moments that you were like, oh, we'll never be able to get through that again. Let me tell you, go to Utah, go backpacking in the back country of Utah, go to the mountains of Utah, go to Colorado and find awe again, and it will change your life. I don't think back to any of those far off places looking for that awe anymore. I've had these experiences since I left the military that are just like, holy shit. Like, I got to lift and hoist the largest flag in the United States in one of the tallest places. Like, this is freaking awesome. Like, I've gotten to start doing adventures again. And that's honestly one of the best therapy modalities out there. Shout out to Beret, like veteran exploration therapy in Colorado. What? Are you kidding me? Dude, you can go over there right now, link up with them and go explore for free. Have an adventure, live life again. Jackie, thank you so much for being here today. To our audience out there that may want to work with you, how do they get a hold of you? How can they start dipping their toes in integrative medicine with somebody like you as their coach?
All right. So I work primarily virtually now, so I can work with people from wherever. My business is called Flourish Momentum, Integrative Health and Wellness for mind, body, soul, and space. And I can work with you locally. If you're local, you can come in person. I'm in the Chicagoland area right now. So when people work with me, I always have an intro call for free. So we can connect and I can learn what you're coming with, what you're looking for, and we can go over the options of packages that I have to offer. And then we pick the one that works best for you. And then that way we can hit the ground running in our first session. And my first session is always a comprehensive integrative health assessment. So we go through all of the different categories of life and I start to connect a lot of dots. We go over your primary goals. You prioritize your goals, and then we come up with essentially our holistic healing journey. It's completely personalized for everyone. Someone might do art therapy the whole time they're working with me. Someone else might never do art therapy. It just really depends on what they most need. And then we work together and pulling out either art therapy or yoga or meditation, Ayurveda, energy healing, feng shui to get where we need to go. I want to say it's incredibly integrative. And so what that means is that we can make so much progress. And my business name is Flourish Momentum because we can really attack in a nice way from all angles. So we're really working with your mind, body, soul, and space. And the difference we create in one really propels growth and movement in the other spectrums as well. So we'll say, like, someone that I'm working with was really distraught by some diagnoses he had received. It started really downward spiraling into hopelessness. Like, what's the point? Got, just really let his diet go to crap. Like, everything that he had been trying to do, he just kind of let go. But then he found himself in this really low point that he did not know how to get out of. Mm. And so his anxiety was like out of control for him. And we met. He's like, I have all these different things that I want to work on, but I can't even like think straight for a second about any of them because my anxiety is so out of control. So we actually started with Ayurveda because in just making some simple shifts to someone's diet or daily routines, his anxiety that he thought was his baseline dropped tremendously. So now he has things that he could do in his daily life to bring his baseline anxiety way down. And then in sessions, we did art therapy for a while because then he kind of had his daily life managed enough that we could go deeper into the
Mhm.
lifelong things that needed to be addressed and processed through. And now, he's dealing with some early onset neurodegenerative things like Parkinson's and other things like that on top of the TBI. But we are doing energy medicine yoga and sessions and these different practices that help his body produce all of these neurotransmitters that help boost his mood and give him endorphins and the dopamine, and just he feels so much better than he did before we met, even though quote unquote more time has gone by. So things could have gotten worse, but they haven't. They've gotten better because now we're actually doing everything that we can to support his physical and mental health. And so anyway, that's what it can look like to work with
That's
me.
awesome. I can't thank you enough for being here, and of course for everything you've done for our community at the Intrepid Spirit. We need more passionate providers like yourself, helping all of us wayward guys. They're just not willing to take a knee that eventually find themselves in these centers. So I'm just absolutely thrilled to be able to have you on the show and to tell you thank you for all of us for everything you've done. So please check out Jackie's website. You'll see it right here. And then go to episode description, hit her up, because in today's world, you need every resource. You don't go to deployment with just one weapon system and hope to get the job done. No, you take every available asset and resource and you hit the enemy from all angles. And that's what we need to do for our health when we find ourselves breaking down. Trauma is not something that we should approach as just one way to fix it. There's multiple approaches. Art therapy, yoga, all these things are valuable. So please, if you're still in and you're at 7th group, do yourself a favor, go talk to a nurse practitioner and get yourself some help. Go to Intrepid Spirit. You won't regret it. Or any other soft guy out there that knows about the Intrepid Spirit and needs to get help, I highly recommend it. Please go out there, take care of yourself. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time. Till then, take care.
Thank you so much.